to disengagement that has begun in Ladakh. Days after India and China reached an agreement to end the standoff between the armies, both Indian and Chinese troops have now begun disengagement at the LAC. 5 tents on each side have been dismantled in the area, with Indian soldiers moving back to the west side of the Charding Nala, while Chinese soldiers are retreating to the east side of the Nala. On Thursday, the Chinese army reduced the number of their vehicles in the area, and the Indian army has also withdrawn some troops from there. There are about 10 to 12 temporary structures and around 12 tents on both sides, which are all set to be removed in the days going forward. During the key bilateral meeting, Prime Minister Modi and Xi Jinping welcomed disengagement between the two nations and soldiers being pulled back. In fact, the 22nd round of Corps Commander level meet and talks expected after patrolling resumes after complete dismantling of the temporary structures at Demchok and Depsang plains.
सीमा पार पिछले 4 वर्षों में उत्पन्न हुए मुद्दों पर बनी सहमति का हम स्वागत करते हैं। सीमा पर शांति और स्थिरता बनाए रखना हमारी प्राथमिकता रहनी चाहिए। म्यूचुअल ट्रस्ट, म्यूचुअल रिस्पेक्ट और म्यूचुअल सेंसिटिविटी हमारे संबंधों का आधार बने रहना चाहिए।
India and China have been involved in talks both at diplomatic and military levels to resolve their differences in certain areas along the LAC. Pursuant to the talks, broad consensus has been achieved to restore ground situation based on the principles of equal and mutual security. The consensus achieved includes patrolling and grazing to traditional areas. This is the power of engaging in continuous dialogue, because sooner or later solutions will emerge.
All right, let me cut across to Shivani Sharma, our correspondent tracking developments along the LAC. Shivani, we hear that at least 5 temporary tents have now been dismantled. That's the first step going forward to disengagement. We're looking at the bilateral talks also showing commitment on the ground. Give us on the significance of this move.
Nabila, the disengagement process started on 23rd of October with the dismantling of the first tent along the line of actual control at Demchok from both the sides. And what we are told that till Thursday night, around 5 tents have already been dismantled from this location, and also the temporary structures that were made of stone, small temporary structures that were made there, and also in Depsang plains, the installations were done by the Chinese have been removed now. They are happening in a phased but a very fast-paced manner, because you can imagine that in last 4 days, 45% of the dismantling has already taken place, and while we are speaking, the dismantling is also happening. So we will get more figures and more updates as the day progresses, but certainly this is a big move and a big breakthrough from India and China. Tensions that were there, and especially in the Demchok and Depsang area, where the disengagement has already started. And when this disengagement is complete within 1 week, Nabila, the patrolling will happen, and patrolling resumes. That means the tensions will release further. And after that, we are getting to know from the sources that there can be another round of co-commander level talks between the top commanders of India and China onto how to go about further to the disengagement and the buffer zones too. So the disengagement is going on at a very fast pace. 5 tents have been removed. That's what we were being told. That means around 45 to 50% of this dismantling and disengagement process has already been done. It will take a few more days to completely dismantle these tents.
All right. Well, stay with us, Shivani. I'm going to cut across to Gaurav Sawant, who's also with us. He's currently in Moscow, Russia, where the BRICS summit has just ended. Gaurav, a quick, elaborate take on what this would mean between India and China. Relations on the border area seem to have improved, but by and large, the economic cooperation between the two countries, which was great before 2020, do you think that will see progress as well?
Genuinely, that would see progress when the trade deficit that's heavily in China's favor, $85 billion in China's favor against India. Only if India gets greater access to Chinese markets will that improve. And all along, Nabila, India has been at a disadvantage, both at the line of actual control and in trade relations. But, given that the relationship came to such a pass only because India hadn't developed either infrastructure at the borders, and we've had not just a lost decade earlier, since 2014, there's a lot of effort that was made to desperately catch up, and that catch up takes a long time. You now have the Sela tunnel, you have broader roads, you have additional troops that are deployed, and right now, do keep in mind that there are 50,000 additional troops on either side who remain deployed all along the LAC. Till the time they get back to their peacetime locations, the situation will remain extremely tense. This is just a disengagement that is taking place. And when you talk about disengagement, this would mean from an eyeball to eyeball confrontation that's happening, 10 tents on their side, 10 tents on our side, soldiers blocking each other's advance. It's virtually shoulder to shoulder, that India and China are confronting each other. That confrontation is on. For genuine peace, there has to be de-escalation and de-induction. And there is no way I see that happening in the near future until China realizes that peace pays richer dividends. As of now, China doesn't appear to realize that. They want access to Indian markets, but they do not want to give India greater access to Chinese markets, especially when it comes to our IT, our pharmaceuticals. All of that remains a big, big question, because China remains, as they say, you can't read the Chinese mind. Perhaps this is the situation where the Chinese are having a little difficulty reading the Indian mind. Therefore, the disengagement, whether it leads to de-escalation and de-induction, remains the big question, Nabila.
Very interesting there, Gaurav. Thank you very much for joining us with those details. But I'm going to quickly take our viewers through exactly what this standoff means for the last few years, and this commitment to now de-escalate shows on the ground. Here's a quick look at the friction points. If I could take you through, starting with the point 15 patrolling. Troops have already been pulled back, as we know. And then next would be the Gogra Hot Springs. Troops have been pulled back there as well in Gogra Hot Springs. And in Galwan Valley, the buffer zone has now been created, which is, of course, something that the Indian Army says it's to be closely watched, the buffer zones. But nonetheless, progress has begun. And north and south of Pangong, both we're looking at the buffer zone that's now being created, along with Depsang disengagement that's already begun as per confirmation, and Demchok also disengagement has begun. So these are the areas basically here that along the line of actual control, including Depsang, Demchok, Galwan Valley, Gogra Hot Springs, north and south banks of Pangong. So all at this point sees some ease in tensions. Now a quick look at the de-escalation or the pullback that the Chinese has committed to in the last few days after the bilateral talks. We hear the Chinese has reduced the number of vehicles that they had deployed. In fact, even the number of Indian vehicles and Indian soldiers from India's side has also been reduced now. And then we understand that patrolling is expected to resume in those areas in the next 4 to 5 days, and also local commander monitoring the disengagement. This is the current developments that we see here after that big bilateral between India and China. And we're seeing all that discussion has finally translated into effective measures of pullback on the ground.